everybody. Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio Weekly Review. Gosh, try saying that quickly. You may be expecting Tom HB to be in the chair today, but instead you've got me, Lucy. And today I am joined by John Gibbs, Bren Poland, and Leanne Lack. So good morning to you all. How are we?
Good.
Yep.
Really good.
Fantastic. So just a quick rundown of today's stories before we get going. We are looking at, should ChatGPT be allowed in IB essays? They're saying yes, but we'll ask your thoughts in a moment. Second, head of a top grammar school was sacked this week after a data breach where she informed parents of which teachers were striking from her school. And third of all, Mr. Gavin Williamson, or Sir Gavin Williamson, was caught red-handed this week being rude about teachers in text messages to Matt Hancock. So without further ado, let's get cracking on this first story. So this came from The Guardian this week, and it was discussing that IB are going to allow ChatGPT, which is this AI robot that can pretty much do anything at this point, it's going to be allowed as a reference in IB essays. So coming to you first, John, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, my thoughts really are that, for start, ChatGPT has sort of arrived rather suddenly. I don't know if you've tried it, but I've given it a go, and it's both remarkable and surprisingly unremarkable. It does things really well, and you think, well, how can they possibly do that? But all new technologies that arrive, the calculator, whatever it is, there'll be some sort of knee-jerk, spontaneous, automatic reaction that this is going to undermine the sanctity of the exam room or testing students. I think, obviously, we're going to have to adapt to ChatGPT, like people adapted to calculators, like people adapted to all the other technological things that came along, and see it as an opportunity, and also see it as an example of the world that these students are going to have to live in. So they are going to be in a chat. This is only the beginning. ChatGPT, if it's a bit clunky right now, I asked it to write a poem the other day in the style of Philip Larkin. It was a terrible poem. But on the other hand, if you ask it to structure a lesson or something, it's just like, my goodness, if I'd only had this when I was teaching. Astounding. It is really, really rather good. So this is only the future, the tip of the iceberg. There'll be lots of technology that will make ChatGPT look clunky in a few years' time. And that's the world of our students. That's the world of the students of the future. So they need to get to use of it. Now, so we should as well. And I have a horrible feeling that what will happen is people will draw the wagons around and they'll try and make exams more stricter or something. And I personally enjoy any kind of technology that undermines things and breaks them up a bit and makes us think about things.
So is the concern, you think, on the back of this going to be that instead of entrusting students to do essays and more coursework and project-based things, that it's going to encourage the idea of moving more towards exams where you're in a hall for 3 hours and you've got yourself and your thoughts and that's it? I don't know, Brent, where you sit on this. Do you think that maybe is a danger here?
Yeah, I mean, John is right. There's always a lag time between new technology and then us catching up and then innovating it and then obviously, using it. I remember back when with Wikipedia, back in the other days of Wikipedia, I once had students copy Wikipedia articles that I had altered to catch them out cheating, to show them how easy it was to alter. It was even better catching a parent out who was pretending that they'd done their homework with their child on an essay on Napoleon that I had altered on Wikipedia to prove that cheating didn't matter. And what I was trying to prove there was you wouldn't do that at university. This before turning it in like universities, and they had to catch up, didn't they? Now all your essays are all turned in, they go through an electronic screening, and that cuts out on cheating. And that took them a while to catch up, didn't it, at that level of education? So it'd be the same with us. What worries me is the way that it cuts out the thinking, the critical thinking process. And the second thing it worries me about is where does it get the consensus information from? So you could flood the internet full of articles, and that would take that as the consensus. But again, as John says, we're in the early days of it, and every time I try to use it during teaching time, funny enough, everybody else is up to the same idea because I can't get on it, and I want to show the kids sometimes. I'm like, shit, yeah, this is ChatGPT. We're really good for you. Really have a go at it. And it comes up, sorry, and it comes up with a really clever message of like, everybody wants to use our service. And I'm like, yes, I want to use your service to show it off. But yeah, it's like everything. We'd have to come up with strategies, and I think going forward, we need to evolve our exam structure anyway. The knowledge-based curriculum hasn't worked. Kids going in with heads full of 12 or 13 subjects with 16 different exam papers. It's getting ridiculous. They're overloaded. They're absolutely overloaded. And anybody who teaches A-level or GCSE will tell you how overloaded our children are, and we're not getting the best out of them. So I think this, for me, forms a kind of a conversation about how we test children, what we're looking for, and the skills they need to prepare them for the world of the future, which is evolving faster than we are.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, this is definitely could be a longer conversation. We could go on and talk just about this. Before we move on, I'm just going to remind everyone of our sponsor, John Catt Education, who are a leading provider of educational books and magazines. If you are after something to add to your collection of books, be it for CPD reasons or anything else, then you can go to John Catt's website and find something wonderful to read. I've got my eye on a few things at the moment as well. So moving on to our next story. And I know Bren's very keen to talk about this one. So this week, the head teacher of a top grammar school was sacked after sending parents a list of striking teacher names. And so this was Charlotte Jordan, who was head or is now outgoing head of King Edward VI, just checking I'm reading my Roman numerals correctly, Five Ways Grammar School in Birmingham. And it said the incident has been relayed to the Information Commissioner, which investigates data breaches. She'd only been the head since September 21, the second female head, so it's quite a sort of sad thing. Parents have been quite sort of sympathetic in some cases and said she clearly made a mistake, but probably thought parents had a right to know. Do parents have a right to know, or did parents have a right to know if their teachers were striking or their students' teachers were striking? Leanne, what are your thoughts on this?
I think, wouldn't you want your head to you want your staff to shine brightest? And I think from a PR point, it's probably not the greatest thing to send out to parents. I think it's such a split country in terms of people that understand why teachers are striking and people that don't understand. And to send out a list of names of teachers, I don't think is great. It's great PR for your staff, and that you want your head to kind of protect you as a teacher, because it's not, you get a lot of backlash sometimes, and I think it's like adding fuel to the fire for some parents who are probably already worked up about the fact that their teacher is not there and their child can't go to school. And like, we're on the back of lockdowns, that's still around, and with like texts that have been leaked, which is we're going to talk about next. I just think we're having a hard time PR-wise as teachers, and to send out a list with names is adding fuel to the fire. I feel bad for those teachers.
It's definitely. I can see Brent's eager to jump in on this, so go for it.
Yeah, completely agree with Leanne. You lost the staff room. To use the football analogy, you lost your players there. I mean, it's sad. It is a sad thing when you see a head teacher sacked, considering the shortage we have of head teachers, and equally as well, such a young head teacher. Hopefully, maybe not career ending. Hopefully, they get another opportunity somewhere to and learn from their mistake. But that's not how to manage people. You don't criticize in public. You criticize in private, and you praise in public. That's how you manage people. That's how you bring people with you. So I'm sorry, but it's also quite dangerous. We know the times that we live in, and parents are very hypercritical. The media is after teachers. It's actually quite dangerous. What they've actually done is they've set some teachers up there, and I think actually people don't realize how difficult it is. How difficult it is to be a teacher. We need support. And I think our head teachers need to support us, and the bulk do. I can only speak to my own experience. As a union rep, I sit between the head teacher and the staff sometimes and grease the wheels. And sometimes I have to side with the head teacher and sometimes side with the staff, but we keep some of our business in-house. We don't clean our dirty laundry in public. We are a community. Schools are communities. And the head teacher sets the tone and sets how that community is laid out. And I think their experience may be shown in that. But yeah, I don't want to see anybody sacked for their job, but I think they've crossed the line there, unfortunately.
And John, what about you? What's your take on this? I mean, Mrs. Jordan has said, I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can say about this at the moment. So she was approached and she's been either choosing not to or is unable to comment at the moment.
Well, I do feel a certain human sympathy for what was obviously, I would say obviously, but yet to hear from her, but a blunderous mistake. I mean, it seems to me that, as you say, Brent, it's a daft thing to do. And but what was her thinking? I don't know. So I'll just jump inside and try and imagine what her thinking was. Was it to try to name and shame? Was it a sense in which those teachers going on strike, the parents should know, so they could know who the good teachers and the loyal ones and so on? Or if that was the case, then it is asking this question, which I suppose we all have to ask ourselves: to what obligation do striking teachers have to make the strike less impactful on the lives of students. You say, well, okay, so if I could alert the school beforehand that I'm going on strike, and that would make the strike less effective or disruptive, what would I then do? And I'm not sure I know the answer to that, actually. Because is a strike symbolic, or is it?
And we've talked about this at great length, sort of in past weekly reviews, and certainly people in their other hosts, TTR hosts in their shows have talked about this. You know, the whole point of strikes is to be disruptive. So were teachers even obliged in the first place to say anything? And you know, if the motivation is to call out teachers, then arguably should you even be in the role of a head teacher and managing people? It would seem extraordinary to me that would be the motivation behind it.
Yes, absolutely. I think that, as Brent said, it's a misunderstanding of the relationship between head teachers and staff, or a very naive one, or a very misguided one.
Brent, do you have any thoughts on what do you think the motivation might have been here?
Look, head teachers are under a lot of pressure. Sometimes we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. The government's put a lot of pressure on head teachers to keep their school open. There have been in schools games of cat and mouse, where they teach the senior staff and the head teacher try and find out the names of the individuals who are going on strike. I've said to the children, the only person that they're going to know is going on strike in my school is me. Any anger is directed towards me. Any parent has a complaint can come to me, because I'm the union rep. I'm not going to hide that. And that way I shield any of my colleagues, their anonymity, because some are nervous about going on strike, because it's not something they do lightly. Now, I've worked at my school 19 years. I love my school. It's not personal to my school or personal to my head teacher, quite the opposite. It is because my union have instructed me, and I'm part of a collective, large group of people who are making an action in a collective way. So that's the spirit of it. And I think maybe, again, we don't know what goes on behind the scenes. And I do feel, again, what John said, a human sympathy towards the individual who's made that mistake. And I'm sure it's a sad thing that they probably would have been a fantastic head teacher, but a mistake that, we make mistakes, we have to be held accountable. And you have to be held accountable for mistakes, regardless if you are a normal teacher or a head teacher.
It's also a shame it comes out so publicly as well, as you say, when we're in a profession that is constantly a political football, constantly vilified in one way or another. So yeah, it's a shame that it made national news, but hey, there we go. Right. Okay, I think we are going to move on in a moment to the story that I'm itching to talk about today. So in a moment, we're going to talk about these text messages. So Gav's been at it again. So in a moment, you can share your thoughts with me. So what happened? Okay, so the article I've got here. So Sir Gavin Williamson was caught up in this Matt Hancock leak this week, being rather rude about us teachers, saying that, we really are quite lazy, that we can't be bothered, a whole host of things. This all in the wake of the person who obviously, as we are well aware, put the famous algorithm in place for exam results and all the rest of it. And then I suppose has the audacity to turn around and say, well, we're lazy, incompetent, and all the rest of it. I'm sure you are all on the edge of your seats wanting to talk about this. Leanne, I'm going to come to you first.
I read the article and a few things stood out, but I had no idea his wife was a primary school teacher. In my notes, I wrote, Gavin's wife is a primary school teacher, question mark, question mark, question mark. That makes no sense, first of all. Where's your empathy? And I'd like to know what his wife teaches. But can I quote from the article?
Yeah, go for it.
The one thing that I noticed says, and I've thought about this actually a lot because I spoke to colleagues about it before we went into lockdown, and we were like, we won't go to lockdown, we're not going to close schools, nonsense. But he said, I think all those who are passionate about education knew that children were best in the classroom. And I stand by this argument, as I hope others do too. And I thought about it, and it's scary because I think if we had stayed in classrooms, how many teachers would have got COVID, survived, not survived? There wasn't a vaccine for a year or so maybe. And I mean, from primary all the way up to high school, we're surrounded by people the whole day. I get petted every 5 seconds by little kids. How would we have avoided COVID if we'd have stayed in classrooms? And I hated teaching online It was miserable. I mean, I did year 6 in the last lockdown, and I used to do register online, and I used to have like 20 gloomy 10-year-olds looking at me. It was so uninspiring. And like, how do you engage like flat faces? It's very difficult. So none of us wanted to teach from our living rooms, but we had to. And I think it's scary to think that we did it and we wanted to do it. I worry how many of us would have got COVID and really not survived it, and had long COVID, and then they would have lost teachers in the workforce. You know, it's an exhausting job and you need a lot of energy for it. So how many of us would have got COVID and not actually been able to do the job afterwards?
Well, this is it. And what's become clear in these text messages throughout the week is the blatant disregard for the British public in general, but just a complete misunderstanding of what, and this is nothing new to us, but a complete misunderstanding of what we do on a daily basis. And it just shows that the people that they're putting into these ministerial roles, be it health minister, be it education minister, whoever it is, just have no clue, because they've never done the job. I can see, John, you're shaking your head. What do you have to say on this?
Well, it's really one of those things where you pull aside the curtain, to reveal the small man behind the thing, and realize you always knew he was there. You always knew they were stupid. This is the revelation that Gavin Williamson and Matt Hancock are idiots. Well, I knew that. It's a complete unsurprising surprise that they should talk to each other this way. And then you say, well, okay, why did I know this? I knew this because years ago, Michael Gove described teachers and the education profession as the blob. And when he described it as the blob, he was tapping into that idea of a kind of unreconstructed 1970s trades unionist image. He's kind of in a mind resistant to change, resistant to technology, and nothing could be more. It's a topsy-turvy world where the governments resist change, and governments impose on schools a kind of liberalizing market forces, which they think of as being modernization, which isn't, and they resist real change. Real change happens in discussions between teachers, and their ideas are much more progressive. And teachers' ideas of how schools should run and unions' ideas of how schools should run was much more advanced than governments. So nothing could be more untrue than teachers resist change and teachers don't are backward looking or something of that kind. The lump, the blob. It's just an insult. And also it reveals how little they know, as you rightly said. How absolutely little they know about the real world. A lot of that's because a lot of them weren't educated in schools that were real. They were pretend schools in a way, and they've come to this world in which they don't understand, they don't understand much of our world.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel that sort of the mentality at this point from those of us who are on the receiving end of this is almost, we're kind of, as you said, sort of, okay, yeah, and we know they think this way, rather than, I mean, to me, the reaction almost hasn't been angry in particular. It's been, we're so used to being
yes.
On the receiving end of your nonsense at this point. We just would like you to kind of vacate the premises so we can go back to, or at least attempt to go back to, something resembling what we understand as how the education system should work. Brent, I can see you pondering there.
I could say a lot about this. I all the way through campaigned for safe schools alongside my union, and again I have to praise Cycling Kev and Uncle Kev and Auntie Mary, I like to call them, and NEU, because they were right. They were absolutely 110% right, and they were told no at the time. They were with the militant unions, and they were correct when they demanded protection for teachers. I will say the political establishment also on the other side of the government also failed. No ifs, no buffs, no equivocations. We were thrown under the bus. There's no doubt about it. We were thrown under the bus. I equate what happened during COVID to teachers as to lions led by donkeys, to the First World War analogy. And John, you're absolutely right. I was thinking of the curtain being pulled back and the Wizard of Oz, or what Bismarck said about making sausages. Politics is like making sausages. You just don't want to see how they're made because it puts you off what it's like. And that's what we've known. That you're absolutely right, Lucy. We've known for a long time how utter contempt they have for the public sector, the nurses, the teachers, the selfless, altruistic individuals who give of a lot. And the double insult is that they dare use and weaponize the children against us as if we don't care about the children or we're greedy, and the stereotypes. That's the worst part of it, is that, and that's what's driving people out of the profession, is the lack of respect, the lack of, I don't expect to be pay raised. I expect the government to say, thanks very much for the job you did during COVID, and we appreciate what you did. I don't expect much more than that, but the opposite, you expect a little bit of gratitude, a little bit of respect. But to be treated with utter contempt and to see exactly how they really feel about you, it doesn't surprise me. It never does surprise me. But what does surprise me is, unfortunately, the short-term amnesia and the selective amnesia that the general public have when they put these people into the positions of authority, and they sometimes, believe the lies. And we need a society, because back to what we do as educators, we need a society of critical thinkers who can see through this, who can see through the curtain before the curtain is raised, so to speak. And that's part of what our job is, isn't it? To ensure that we put, good people in decision making, that make decisions based upon the science and evidence rather than what the optics of the headline is. And that's unfortunate. That's what's happened, But more will come out. I think this is only the start, because the inquiry's got to come. So I think this is the kind of pre-inquiry kind of dump, and hopefully this is going to be the end of it. But there will be more that will come out during the inquiry, no doubt about it.
Oh yes, that was going to be my next thing. Do you think that we are at the just at the start of what's going to be leaked from all of this? I mean, I don't think we're going to be the only ones in the firing line. Leanne, I can see you wanting to say something.
I just don't understand why there's not a teacher or an academic as an education secretary. They're so out of touch, like John said, they're so out of touch. And I feel like as teachers, we're into pedagogy and moving things forward in the best interest of the kids. And to go back to the first story, there's an argument or a battle between these things, like technology, the chatbot that we were talking about. And then I'm not sure high school, but in primary, the big push now from Ofsted is not what's in a book, but what the kids remember. We teach 4 different subjects throughout the day, and we expect them to remember everything. And it's a massive ask. And that ask comes from the government. So I don't think they understand children. And I fear that it won't change until there's a teacher as EdSec or someone with educational knowledge. Someone that wants to understand education. I feel like they just don't want to understand education. I don't know. I don't think it will change until that changes, unfortunately.
Well, the current environmental secretary was telling us to eat turnips recently, so I think it's not just education, I think across the board.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but also life experiences,
It's, well, it's...
not only do they...
No, go on, John, go ahead.
I say, not only do they profoundly misunderstand education but it's a class misunderstanding of education. They see state education as effectively what they want it to do, and what it does as being out of kilter. What they want it to do is to train students to be good workers and so forth. I'm not going to sound too Marxist on this, but that's what they want it to do. They want education to solve the problems of whatever the latest problem in the headlines is. So politicians will impose on schools a kind of an agenda which doesn't fit with, as you say, Leanne, doesn't fit with our understanding of what it is to be a teacher. So they're always talking against us and out of kilter with what actually the lived experience of teachers really is. It's rare in a way that the government is in tune with what schools do. Yeah. Most of the time they'll be trying to force the round peg into a square hole of some kind.
Kids have changed. They're not the same as what they would have been when these people experienced education. So we're teaching children that we talk about all the different types of learners, and you can't just teach in one way and expect 30 children to remember facts in an hour. I don't think it's possible. I don't think you'd expect an adult to do it.
But also things have changed since COVID as well. The whole thing almost needs dismantling and rebuilding with input, as you said before, Leanne, from people who absolutely are on the ground and absolutely understand fundamentally that, where children are in terms of cognitive development, what certain mental health issues, how they fit into things, how, all of the kind of outside stuff, and, how we move forward from what has been a huge deal, and we're only just really starting to see the fallout from COVID and the impact that has had on children's learning, certainly with the younger ones in primary as well.
I just think retention skills are not non-existent, but it's not like it used to be, and everything is so like to hand in 5 seconds. But
I'll give you one analogy. Sorry, Lan. I'll give you one analogy. A classic example is the analog clock, the clock with the hands on it. We had exam hall with a big giant Big Ben clock on it, and they've given in and putting a digital clock up because the kids don't use those type of clocks any longer. Now we could say, oh, that's a disgrace, kids today. You think, well, in their world now they don't need to. They have digital phones, and you can lament that and say, oh God, it's a loss of a key skill of being able to read a clock. Well, that's the same as Zeppelins and hovercrafts and stuff. Technology moves on. We evolve. Part of what we do as educators is to we ourselves are learners, aren't we? Teachers are students themselves. That's how we become good teachers. So the guys in charge. This is the thing that upsets me the most. To summarize, is the guys in charge didn't show in those text messages that they evolved and learned from their mistakes. And the second thing is they didn't show that they were contrite or that they were willing to learn. But something we teach the youngest children: you make a mistake, it's fine. You make a mistake. You're allowed to make a mistake. But to continually make the same mistake and cover it up and take no responsibilities, it's like some petulant teenager we have to scold. We've got a government full of petulant teenagers who won't do what they're told, who tell us what to do, and they won't even do it themselves. They haven't got the maturity to actually be in charge. They're not fit to govern, to be honest with you. They haven't got the maturity to evolve like people we get to evolve.
We get told off, and Gav gets a knighthood.
Yeah.
I've thought of one silver lining to the story, though.
Go on.
One thing to cheer us up on Sunday, and that is that if Gavin Williamson, if Matt Hancock, if Matt Hancock were to find himself in the confines of hell, and in the 5th or 6th ring of hell, he finds himself where all the incompetent ministers go. And they've devised a particular torture, a particularly monumentally ghastly torture, specifically him. The torture would be that all of his messages on WhatsApp had been released to the Daily Telegraph, and they were going to release them one at a time as he has to sit at home and watch them. And it must be the most excruciating torment for him yet devised. And only, and how it's happening in the real world, and we can watch it. It's delightful.
I like the fact that sending a former fire salesman to hell.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, an extra twist. Yeah.
You've thought about that at great length, John, which I respect as well. Okay, right. So that has been, we went on quite a journey there, quite an emotional journey. But to round out this lovely morning's proceedings, I want you all to have a very quick think, and I'm sure you've thought about this already, Brent, your favorite show from this week. So in a very quick second, we will go through that. I'm trying to think who am I going to pick on first? John, I'm going to pick on you first. In 30 seconds, can you summarize your favorite Teachers Talk radio show from this week, please?
Well, of course, they were all wonderful. So it's very, very difficult to choose. But the one that stood out was just the topic immediately grabbed me, which was the creative writing in prisons. It was Chris Vowles, and his discussion with people who had actually been there. I mean, this is the wonder of getting people on live to talk about their experiences in prison, their experiences of educating in prison, and talking. I thought, well, creative writing in prisons hits two things. It hits the low esteem, and the illiteracy is often behind the so many lives of so many people in prison. And we talked earlier about the out of touch, and governments out of touch, and institutions messed around with. Prisons are an absolute national disgrace and have been because they are such political footballs. And to hear people trying to do the right thing in a small way was great.
Fabulous. Leanne, coming to you.
Mine was Getting Girls into STEM, the late show with Tom Rogers. I've got a lot of girls in my class, and I try very hard to inspire them into doing some understanding of the world activities. And even from 4 years old, it's difficult. So the one thing that stood out, and I've heard of this before, where they asked children to draw a scientist, 98% drew a white man, 2% drew a woman. This has been going around for a while, so I don't think it's a new stereotype, but it really is something that I think needs to change, and you need leadership on board to change that. So we can't just do it. I don't think it's just a classroom-based problem. It has to be a whole school initiative.
Brent, coming to you. Have you got one?
I'm going to go with home. Question of sport, I'm going to go with home. Not going to go away. I'll go with the NEU debate. I sat actually at my five-a-side football on Friday evening, so I missed the first half an hour, and I sat in the car in the driveway and listened to the next hour on my radio, and it was absolutely fantastic. Congratulations to Tom HB, our own very much Paxman. He was very good, very fair, very thorough, very clinical, and some difficult questions were handled by both. What was really good is to see that shared around union sort of membership, to say if you're struggling to find difference between the two candidates, have a listen to that. So it's really nice to see in some of my other areas, Teachers Talk Radio pop up, and people endorsing and saying, "Here, listen to this. This might help you make the decision." So performing a good function, I think, for the teaching profession, and a really, really good interview. Very solid, an hour and a half. It was thorough. It was. I tell you, I wouldn't have got that on Newsnight, so that was very impressive, and really proud of that. I think that was a cracking piece of radio. That.
Brilliant. And I'll be very quick. My show of the week was Ben Thomas's Twilight show about private versus state schools. Very interesting to listen to, given that I have worked in both, and I identified with a lot of the pros and cons that were raised in that, and the challenges that exist, and whether private schools should exist, are they the right thing, or should they be abolished altogether. So it was a very, very interesting and very important discussion, and all of these are available to listen back to either via links on Twitter Spaces, or some of them are indeed on Spotify as well. So all that remains for me to say is thank you very much, everybody, for joining me this morning. I've had a wonderful time, and hopefully we can do this again soon.